Okay, so let's move on to the second layout that you have to do using HTML and CSS. If you've taken classes with us before, perhaps you've definitely heard of HTML5 semantic elements, but perhaps you've seen the layout that the W3 Schools presents for the semantic elements. I'm going to click on that link. And when you see, first of all, what semantics elements are, and we've already discussed a little bit of this, that semantic elements are basically parts of the code that sound like what they are. They really don't have any big function, as in they're going to code something to look a certain way. Rather, they're going to help us navigate through the code. They're going to help your partners. They're going to help your co-employees, people that are working on the same website as you are, know what you're talking about, so that when you have a header code in the top here, for example, that's what you're talking about. There could be H1s, there could be large photographs, etc., that all live in the header. However, if you were to call the header something else, the browser really wouldn't care. You could call it a footer, and as long as you give it the right code on top, it'll work fine. Will it confuse the people you work with? Probably. So that's why we want to keep on using all semantic elements, especially the ones listed on the screen, the ones listed on the illustration, the header, the navigation, the section, article, asides, and footers. There's plenty more, and these are just some of the plenty more. I'd say there's probably about twice as many as these in total, but the ones we're going to concentrate on specifically for this layout are the header, navigation, the section, article, aside, and footer. This is an image, so you can't see the underlying code, but I'll walk along with you to get it coded together. So first of all, let me open up and have my GitHub ready. So I'm going to go to GitHub. I'll go into my ARTV 2470 week 3 folder, where I already have at least one layout, and I have one layout and one CSS. Should have really done this in a separate folder, but here we are. We'll be able to catch up with it at some point. Let's add a file and create a new file, and let's call this one layout02.html. No spaces, no uppercase, and let's just commit it. We'll have it ready for us when we come back. We're going to be coding it in CodePen. Let's create the second file. So I'll add a new file, create a new file, and we're going to call this one layout02.css. Let's commit this new file. And while we have given you in the previous lessons some code that you can use this code, but what I really would recommend, just be faster, is if you go into the layout 1 that you've already created and copy this code, because the code we're doing is going to be very similar. It's going to be a couple more lines, but not that many. So I right-clicked and copied. You can also press Ctrl-C. And then Command-C on a Mac. I'm going to go back to week 3, find the layout 02, and edit it. I'm going to click on the button that is shaped like a pencil, edit this file, and now I'm in the code, which is blank. I just going to press Control-V as in Victor to paste. Make sure I'm at the top. Control-V. I'm going to make this a little bit larger. Makes it easier for me to read, and I know that your screens they vary in size. So let's see. Let's change some things. We're gonna change the title to layout 2 for starters. We're gonna change the CSS dependency to layout 02 CSS. That's the file we just created. And let's delete all this. I just want the body. Only interested in the body. You don't have to split your screen. I will, just to follow a little bit better in the space that I have, and so that you can follow me. I'm going to separate a tab and get it onto the side so that this will be my code, and then my reference point will be on this side. So my image that I'm trying to recreate, it's this right here. more specifically, we're really trying to get for, well, I already closed it, but the link that's included, the semantic elements, we're really wanting to get something that looks a lot like the picture here, the header, nav, etc. Header on top, navigation below, and then content to the left, aside on the right. This could be flipped, and the footer at the bottom. When you create your own web applications, you can start off with this template that you're going to be creating. So this is going to be a valuable file for you to have. The colors, I'll show you how we're going to be getting that. There's two links to follow. The one I clicked, the semantic elements, and then the color picker, which we've used before, I think. Maybe not in this class, but I'll show you what it means. Okay, so I know for sure that I'm going to have a header, navigation, section, aside, article, and footer. And I know I deleted them, but I'm going to retype them. So I'm going to open up a bracket and say this is the header, and then close it. In the next line, and I'm just going from top to bottom, I'm going to have a navigation. Even though it's spelled out navigation, our code is only NAV, and then open up bracket / NAV. I hope everybody understands the concept of opening and closing brackets. You open them up with angle brackets. It's less than and greater than symbols on your keyboard. And then the code or the tag name goes inside. You see how this has header, navigation, section, article, etc. We'll be adding that text shortly. It's just going to be minimal text that's added in there. I'm going to create a section and close it. There is an article, and we close it. We're going to have an aside, and we're closing it. And finally, we're going to have a footer. So basically, here's the HTML, most of it, for this page. And I typed HTML. It's the footer that we're closing. So we open the header, close it, navigation, close, open, section, article, aside, which I misspelled, and footer. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements. One thing though, I don't know if you noticed that the section and article are on top of each other here, and the aside is here. In other days, I would have said to create a section or something that commands all of these three things. We're going to have another tag. It's going to be a main tag. We're going to say that the section and the article all belong in the same place, so that when we add the code to style, we're only dealing with the mass that is the section and the article at the same time, as opposed to the section goes here, the article goes there. Actually, the section and the article are one right next to each other in the scheme of grand things, and then there's going to be something else that's going to hold them together. So right before the section starts, we're going to open up a main, and after the article ends, we're going to close it. Okay, and there we are. So I'm going to commit this, but before I do, I'm going to copy the text, all my 21 lines. You may have more or less. I'll copy that, right click copy, Control C, and then I'm going to commit the changes. So now, there you go. I'm going to go back to my week 3, just because when I come back, there's going to be CSS, etc. that I need to add here. I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm going to navigate to CodePen. When in CodePen, I'm going to create a new pen. Your screen may look different, and maybe it does completely. Let me see. It might look something like this. It'll help me then find that I can create a pen, and this is going to be a blank pen basically. And what's loop here, a fruit loop or a for loop? It depends on the for loop, actually. So the JavaScript we won't need. CSS we will. But HTML is what I copied from before. I'm going to press Control V as in Victor to paste. Here is my code. It includes the all the standard stuff. It knows that the layout 2 is a title, that it's going to be hooking up to a layout02.css file later. That's why we get the error, because the CSS is right here for this file. And then we have all the stuff that we created. Now, I told you that we're going to be adding some text, so basically the name of the tag will go in between the tag. So I can spell out navigation. I don't need one for the main. I need one for the section. And notice how they're starting to appear on the right side. Obviously, that looks nothing like our goal. Everything gets stacked on top of each other. That's how the text works. It works from top to bottom. But then we're going to tell it which way to go by adding CSS. I'm going to minimize this a little bit, so in my CSS I can actually begin to and add the code. So let me give this a name. I'll click on the pencil and I'm going to call this layout 02.html and I'll save it. Hopefully it'll stop bugging me that, hey, you haven't saved. Okay, so I know that we kept the body from before, so we're definitely going to need a body coding. Body, open up curly braces, go to the next line. I'm adding spaces just so that they're easier to read. We're going to be using a header as well. Open up the curly braces. Then there's going to be the navigation, just NAV, open up the braces. We're going to have a main, even though it doesn't contain anything, it contains the tags inside. We're going to have to tell it what to do with the tags inside. Then we have a section. And it helps that I put the names on the right side, otherwise I'd forget. What do I have? Section, I have an article. Then I have an aside. And finally a footer. When you get to code a lot of pages, you tend to remember what the parts of the navigation, or rather the parts of the website are. This is why, you took biology all that time ago and you know the names of most of the bones in your body. And just like that, we have a skeleton on the right side that's got a head, it's got shoulders, it's got a torso, it's got hips, it's got legs, it's got feet, basically. Okay, so what does the body do? Let's look at the picture once again. Oh, that's right. I forgot I was treating this as two screens. Let's get it back to two screens. There you go. So we have the header. And the header goes all the way across. Everything goes across except section, article, and aside. So count on having lots of 100% width along all these parts. Let me look at my CSS. The body, it goes, not only does it go all the way across, notice how there's a little bit of a space around it before it reaches the edge. So while in other assignments we might have the margin go to 0, we want a little bit of space to take place here. So the margin, I'm going to say it's going to be at 10, but I still would like it to navigate its way around back and forth. So I'll say auto right after that, and semicolon ends that line. And I think that's all I'm going to add for now for the body, maybe all that's needed. Because this is a tiny screen, I'm going to make this a little bit tinier so I can read that and give this a little bit more space so that we can see what's happening on the design. Our header then goes all the way across. It's a blue color. Notice how this is kind of light blue, then not so light, a little bit darker, 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 darker. So you don't have to come up with these colors on your own. You can click on the link in the assignment and go to the color picker. I picked blue. You can pick red. Just make sure that you can tell that there's difference between the boxes. I'll go with green this time. I'll pick a green right here, and it's going to give me a variety of colors, telling me that 100% that green is actually, it's very white, and this is at 0%. Then it gets darker as we add the colors or release some of the values. So 0, 0, 0, the absence of colors, actually this is all black. At the very top it's all white. That's the highest number. it works backwards. So you don't have to work backwards. You can actually just say, I'm going to make everything this color at the very top. I'm going to start with the 80%. I'll double click to select that and copy it. And so then my header, I'm going to give it a background color. Background hyphen color, colon, and then the hashtag, because this is a hexadecimal, pressing Control V as in Victor to paste, semicolon to end the line. And the header, as tiny as it is over here, it's already got a background color. Could I add this to I know that every single item except the main will have a background color. Could I copy this and just go changing it? Why not? Let's work a little bit smarter, not harder. So I Control C. You can also right click and copy this, just to give us a space and to give you the code. That way you don't have to navigate back and forth. The main will not have a color because it will depend on the content. Pressing Control V to paste, and I'm pasting everything in every element. So boxes appeared on the right side. They're at 100%, so it goes from left to right. There's the 10 pixel margin, so it will never reach the edge, and that's what we want. So now to change the colors, I said that I started at 80%. Let's see what 70% looks like, and actually it looks like this. It's a 66 FFF, etc. I'm going to Control C to copy, and the second element's the navigation. I'm going to I'm double clicking. Every time I double click, it will select everything that until it reaches a logical end in the selection. It will not get the hashtag. It's a different kind of character. Pressing Control V will replace it. And you notice right away, well, hopefully you notice, this may not be a different enough color. Maybe the blue worked better, but I'm still seeing the difference. I'm going to go to 65 instead of 70, and I'll copy, Control C and Control V. If you're using different colors, if you're using reds, greens, etc., or blue or purple, that's fine, as long as we can tell that there's a difference. I'm going to jump to this one, to 55, Control C to copy, Control V when I select the background color on the right. The section now has a sort of a different color. This may not have been the best choice for the colors, but I already started. So I'm just going to skip a little bit more so there's more of a difference on the right side. I'll copy the 35 and apply that to the aside. Well, no, actually to the article. You know what? I'm gonna change family. I'm gonna change to something else, and that will really mix it up. You can do the same, as long as, once again, we can tell what's going on. I have to stick to lighter colors anyway, so that we can read the what the text says below it. So I'm copying the hexadecimal for that purple, and I'm going to change it up in navigation, and then get another one, copy that and add it to the footer below. And that's still readable. The aside could use a different one. How about this one at 80%? Copy and aside, paste. Okay, so it's kind of funky. It's not the color scheme that I will end up with on a real application, but for the purposes of this, it's going to work fine. Because it's at 100%, it will only go as far as the screen will allow it. So we have done just the color on all of them. We know what they're going to look like, and they have some text inside that tells us, this is in the HTML, what each item is, header, navigation, etc. So let me go to the code, and let's go back and look at the assignment itself. We have the header, we have the navigation that's already going all the way across. We have only told it, however, that it's got a color. So let's do that. Let's say that the width will be at 100%. Do you need a space after the colon? No, it's just good practice so that when you're copying and pasting, especially when you're copying or cutting, that you'll find it quicker. I'm going to go to the next line, and just like we did in the previous assignment, this is going to be maybe 20% of the top. So for starters, I'll say that the height is that 20 VH, so it's a vertical height of 20%. I will save when I see the save button. If you can see the save button, save. Okay, well, let's move on to the navigation. I mean, I know that the navigation goes all the way across, so guess what? The width is 100%. And then the height is going to be a similar. I should have just copied and pasted, but instead of 20%, I think that this is like only 1/4, 1/5 of what it's got on top. So let's say that's 5 VH. And then the main, we'll come back to the main after we get the stuff that goes inside of it. The section already has the color, and the section will have a height inside of the main. The height will be, I guess it's going to be, is it 50% of that? Which is actually 50% of 60, which is going to be 30 VH. We'll give it a 30 VH, and I can copy this, and the article is going to be the same height of 30 VH. So I got a header, navigation, section, article, aside, and footer. If this were your app on the right, it would already kind of look like this. It would have a header, it would have a navigation with your buttons, section, article, aside would be actually below. So we want it on the right side. That's where the CSS will come in. So the aside, which is very tall, it's as tall as the section in the article. That's something to remember, that the aside really doesn't have a height. It will only be as tall as it's allowed to be. So that's going to be tricky when we come back to it. And by tricky, I mean different. Okay, before I get lost in this, aside, we're going to already have the color we need. I was talking about the height. Well, let's do the width first because it doesn't go all the way across. And the width instead is going to be, I'd say, is it 30% of, or is it 70% to go from here to here, and then this is 30% to go from here to here? Maybe I'll say that the aside is going to be 35%, and then the other side can be 75. And notice how the aside then is telling me it's going to be a little column like that. It's on the wrong side though. How do we fix that? Do we float it to the right? And actually, I thought about that. Maybe we can float it to the right, but since these things are stacked on top of each other, and we learned this in Web 1, our floating goes from left to right. So whenever an element floats, it wants to stick to the right side of the other item before it, so it needs to float to the left. So I'll add a float, colon, left, semicolon. And the footer is trying to do the same thing. The footer is trying to float to the left along with it. And footers normally don't float. So let's say that, well, first of all, it needs a width, right? So we got to say that's going to be 100% as opposed to just a little thing that's there. Width, 100%, semicolon. Let's give it a height. Height will be, let's make it twice as large as the navigation. It will be 10 VH because it is at least twice as large as the navigation. And we got our color, we got our width. Oh yes, we were debating, will it float to the left? Maybe. Let's try it out. We'll float to the left so that it can stick somewhere in the design. So my footer is background color, width 100%, float to the left, height is 10 VH. Okay, so section, article are there, and we said though that we were going to go back to the main and tell the main what to do, because the main is holding two of those elements together. It's holding the article and the aside. So main, which doesn't have a color for sure, we can't tell it though. Remember how we made the other items 35%? So 100 minus 35 is 65. So we'll type that, 65%. and I see that I misspelled width, 65%, semicolon. Let's change this to the correct spelling. Even one misspelled word, one letter out of place, will come back to haunt us. So I see the space now being created there, because then this only occupies 65% of that. And because we have told everything to be floating to the left, as we should, it's just going to be assembled like Legos. Let's then float this to the left, semicolon. Okay, remember when I told you that the aside didn't have a height? And now we see why it doesn't really have a height. It's because we don't know how tall the section and the article are going to be in the end. We haven't told it anything, and we really don't want to tell it much. We've only told it that it's going to be a relative 30% of the whole height. So what does that mean to the aside? Does it mean, is it going to be 60 relative percent of the whole height? Or is it going to be 100% of what's going on with the section, the article? Well, those are questions that are left unexplored now, but we do need to have the aside go all the way to the bottom. How can we do that? Well, we can tell it we can tell it to be at least as tall as something, or not as tall as something else, and we do have CSS codes that will allow us to do that. Therefore, the aside, we're going to give it a rather than a height, we're going to say be at least this tall. So aside, instead of height, right, which is what we never say, height, and I said that if we add 30 and 30 we'd get 60. What happens if we do that? 60 VH semicolon? It tries to go all the way. And this is not a problem just yet, but it will be once there is content coming in. So instead of saying the height, let's do this, minimum height, min-height, which will have the same result, or at least a similar result. It looks the same, but what we're saying is be at least this tall. If it needs to be more, we would have to control it later. Well, at any rate, it's different colors, but I have the header, I have the navigation, I have the section on top of the article, and the footer, and the aside. I can now sort of liberate this so that it shows me more of the screen, and that's what we wanted to do. In my GitHub, which I still have open, I did make some changes, not to that one, I should have made a new folder. Let's go to the layout to HTML. I'm going to edit this because we did make some changes, or some additions anyway, to this code. And click anywhere in the white area, press Ctrl A to select all, backspace to delete, and then the HTML that we added the names. I'm going to click somewhere inside, do the same thing, Ctrl A to select all, Ctrl C to copy, Command A, Command C if you're in a Macintosh, and then Ctrl V as in Victor to paste the HTML on layout2.html. Scroll to the bottom, commit these changes. Remember at the beginning, even though we had an error in the other one, we still are looking for layout2 CSS, layout02.css, which is a file we created at the very beginning of this video. Layout02.css, we're going to open that. It should be blank, and it is. Let's edit this file by clicking the pencil. Let's look at our CSS in CodePen. I'm going to make this text a little bit smaller because it's driving me crazy. And here's my CSS. I'll click anywhere inside the CSS window, press Ctrl A to select all, Ctrl C to copy, and then move back to my CSS file. I deleted a couple of spaces to start at the top, Ctrl V to paste, and we will commit the changes. I'm going to click on the repository name, just sort of travel back in and find week 3. Week 3 has all the layouts. We're right now interested in layout 2. That's the file we just created. And we have this series of names from the repository, the folder name, followed by the name of the HTML file. And it's a lost art selecting text. So let me try it again. I'll type it. I'll select all of those elements, right click, and tell it to go to. Could I have just typed my username.github.io/week03/layout02.html? Yes, but I don't know who I'm trying to impress. Here is the layout. If this were a smaller device or a wider device, the layout will change accordingly. And that's what we want for your applications. Notice though how it will only get so small. That's something that we will be fixing in later lessons. So for this assignment, make sure that you have a page like this published, that you have a header, navigation section, article, aside, and footer, that they're different colors so that we can see what each element is. It doesn't matter what colors they are. I hope that everybody's using different colors, right? So I'm going to copy the URL on top. I selected it, right click, copy, go back, find my assignment, and inside of the assignment, layout 2, scroll to the bottom of the page, write submission, and here you can Control V your result and hit submit. If you have any questions about this or any other assignment, please send your instructor a note. We'll be sure to get to it and answer as soon as we can.